So let's look back at some of the highlights from part one of the race. The race having got underway earlier on this morning when the ambient conditions were nice and cool, but it all went the way of the 2Cs Motorsport car. Ran outside, picking up places in the early stages of the race, went Ian Loggy at the wheel of the sister car, whilst the battles ahead all started to unfold. There were problems early doors for one of the Ferraris. Damage to the front corner of it brought that number 33 Kessel Racing car into the pit lane early. They would ultimately finish part one in 10th position. Fights going on down through the order, including the number 91 car of Baron Racing, Mikael Mack, bringing that car towards the checkered flag. Whilst in the early stages of GT4, it was the Greystone McLaren that was leading the way. The car having been started by Ian Campbell. A brief safety car period as a result of the incident that occurred. That unfortunately putting out the number 11 Kessel Racing car in the hands of Roberto Pampanini, the starting driver, in the early stages of the race. It was all done under braking. There wasn't contact, but as Pampanini speared sideways, there was contact with the barriers, and then the car also hit the outer wall as well, meaning that brought out the safety car, and it was also meant that the number 11 car was out for the weekend. Once the safety car came in, there was a flurry of activity in the pit lane, because any pit stops that are done while safety cars are out there do not count towards your tally. All the way through the race, it was really the number one 2Cs Motorsport car that was dominating the way. The only time they didn't lead the race was during the pit stop cycles, and whilst there was a brief overlap between it and its sister car. There was good squabbles going on as well. Dominic Baumann, SPS Automotive Performance, and their team looking to try and carve their way through, but the pressure was telling. Valentin Pierberg behind the wheel, allowing Ferraris to work their way through and gain the places. In GT4, briefly, the Aston Martin led, but up front, again, the 2Cs Motorsport cars going together. Eddie Cheever, who was a lap adrift, trying to unlap himself, squeezed his way past Ian Loggy, thought that he might gain a lap back, but as it was not to be. The continuing battle between the 2Cs cars would see, regardless of who was behind the wheel, the cars ebbing and flowing. With subject to the driver combinations, they would close up on some laps, they would start to pull away on others, so the gap was always like a little piece of elastic. Close towards the end of the race, Tarabini almost chopped across the nose of Alessio Salucci. Alessio Salucci was struggling towards the end of his stint, and it would see the VR46 Ferrari drop his way down through the order, being passed by Mikael Mack, and also later on towards the race being passed by Eddie Cheever and also Dominic Baumann. But on the whole, the race went to plan for the vast majority. There were several drive-through penalties. There was a little bit of contact towards the end of the race as the Century Motorsport BMW got into the side of Mikael Mack or vice versa, bringing that Ferrari into the pit lane. But for the number one 2Cs McLaren, it all absolutely went to plan.
So 6 hours done, 6 hours to go, and it was a grid based on that finishing order at the end of part one, and it was Ben Barnicoat that went sprinting off into the lead of the racers. Lower down the order there was the now traditional early race drama for the number 33 Kessel Ferrari. Around it went, it picked up frontal damage, but didn't need to pit and soldiered on into battle, ultimately coming home in 10th place. Wasn't long before the light was starting to fade as number one Ben Barnicoat started to build up the lead. 88 Dominic Baumann was on a real mission further back, and in the GT4 category it was looking very McLarenish as the Greystone GT entry continued to hold sway and build that gap over the opposition. There was no stopping number one, however. 66 was in a little bit of strife. Sparks coming from underneath the car meant that was starting to attract attention. Dominic Baumann likewise, and that was largely because of his pace. In 46, David Fuminelli was doing a great job. Unfortunately, though, there was a bit of contact, not with him at the wheel. It was when we had Luca Marini behind the wheel as that tangled with number 66, the Ian Loggy-driven Mercedes. Again, though, the cars managed to keep going in that stint. Minimal damage sustained, and there were some good fights going on all the way up the order. Another star of the early part of the race was Dries Vanthoor. He was flat last, many laps down, but absolutely determined to set the fastest lap of the race. He missed doing so, but he was a star to watch while he was trying hard. Through the traffic came Mercedes number 1, trying to stretch that advantage all the while, as once more there was a Ferrari fight, as Alessio Sallucci had to give way in the end to number 51, Giorgio Sergio going through as they came underneath the hotel. Place gained as number 99 of Dries van Thor was handed over to Alex Arca, and then Alex got a little bit giddy. Multiple track limit violations came, and that wasn't the worst of it either. There was then this incident. He got into the back of the Ferrari number 61 of Grunewald coming down towards turn 16. That gave damage to the back of the Ferrari, but it gave ample damage to the front of the Audi, enough to mean that it came into the pit lane and would ultimately be retired. So with the Audi out of the race, attention switched elsewhere. 51, for example, Giorgio Sergio sideways over the curb coming out of turn 1, pressing on before he handed that car over to Eddie Cheever, who was another driver that was going to really star. Through the traffic would come Isa Al Khalifa as he did his stint in the middle of the 6 hours, picking his way through the traffic. Kessel Racing monitoring what was going on, and particularly keen about the VR46 entry, because David Fuminelli was getting involved with Mikael Greni. They were on different laps, but both eager to try and push on, find clear space, and then not be impeded with a battle. At the checkered flag, though, it was a win for the 2Cs Motorsport Mercedes of Martin Kodrich, Ben Barnicoat and Isa Al Khalifa. A dominant performance all the way through. And Mark Werrell, it has been another fascinating race here at the Yas Marina circuit.
Fascinating race, and wonderful that we're celebrating it in fine fashion in the 10th ever running of the Golf 12 Hours at Yas Marina. Memorable race, wonderful to be part of again. What a great event.
Mark, absolutely right. So as we remind ourselves of the winning drivers on the podium, it has been a race full of drama all the way through, and with some very happy drivers making their way onto the podiums, perhaps none more so than those at VR46, but on top step, a second 12-hour win in the Gulf, but this time it's Abu Dhabi rather than in Bahrain, to Martin Kodrich, Isa Al Khalifa and Ben Barnicoat representing the 2Cs Motorsport team. A job well done, and we celebrate their success. So 2Cs Motorsport has done it again.